Have you ever wondered what really happens on those narrow cemetery roads that twist along the Appalachian ridges, where iron gates breathe and the night seems to count your steps? Tonight I'm sharing 5 true encounters. Lanterns that choose their pallbearer, a gate that opens into your hallway, a trunk that taps back, and a white buck waiting at freshly cut earth. These aren't campfire tales. Turn off the lights, lock your doors, and listen close, before the road counts you. If you ever drive Pine Hollow after midnight, count the little crosses. You will always end up one short. I learned that on a night I still smell when it rains. I was working towing on the night shift, the kind of job where the radio is your only friend and the road teaches you how to talk to yourself. Dispatch called me about a dead sedan stuck on Cemetery Road through Pine Hollow. Locals do not use the real name when it is dark. They call it the Road of Little Crosses. The old graveyard sits on a rise above it, a low stone wall, a bent iron gate, and a fringe of pines that hum when there is no wind. People say the crosses show up after wrecks and stray dogs, after anything with a heartbeat does not make it home. I did not believe that. I had seen teenagers stick plywood memorials in ditches. I figured it was the same sort of thing. I came in from the south, past the boarded feed store, and the creek that shines like a blade when the moon tilts. The fog was lying in a strip across the hollow, low and straight like it had been measured and placed. My headlights reached the bend, and there they were. Little white crosses, maybe 2 feet tall, set at the shoulder every 20 paces or so. The paint was new on some, peeled thin on others. Some had twine around the center. Some had a nail through the top with nothing hanging off it. For no good reason, I started counting. I lost count after 12 because a whip-poor will called from the fence and a nail tapping started up from somewhere ahead. A slow tack, 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 like somebody was making another. The sedan sat with its hazard lights on, soft orange flashes like a tired heartbeat. It was pulled to the gravel right across from the cemetery gate. No driver, no footprints that I could see, just wet grass bending the wrong way to suggest someone had stood by the ditch and waited. My radio crackled and then bit my ear with static. I turned it off. I did not like anything about the way the fog paused here and held its breath. I backed the truck to the sedan and got the boom lined up. The chain scraped the hitch in a way that sounded like a fork dragged along a plate. The orange lights reflected off the gate and made it look like it was moving, like it breathed a little with each flash. That nail tapping got louder the moment I bent to hook the carriage. I looked around with my flashlight and swept it slow. The beam ran along the row of crosses. The paint shined. The wood grain showed dark lines like veins under skin. I decided to call out. I said, "Hello? You with the sedan? You in the woods?" My voice did not go far. It felt like it stepped off the pavement and fell down a well. The tapping stopped when I spoke and started again when I shut up. Quicker now, like whoever was doing it did not want to waste the silence. I got the chain set and went around to check the car. The driver's side door was locked. The back right window had greasy prints on the inside, like someone pressed their forehead there and fogged it, then dragged fingers down slow. The glass was cold enough that when I leaned on it, my skin stuck for a second. I shivered and told myself to stop being dramatic. I did another sweep with the flashlight and aimed it at the gate. Something was hanging there that I had not seen before. It was a small cross made from 2 sticks and twine, the kind kids make at camp. It had letters burned into it, rough and crooked. My name was there. Not my last name, my first name. The way my mother says it when she is worried. My hand went straight to my phone. I do not know why. I pulled it up and the screen pulsed and showed 1 bar, then none. When I tried to dial, the call hung and cleared itself like a breath on a mirror. I said my name out loud because I needed to hear it sound normal. It did not. It sounded smaller than I wanted it to. I walked to the gate. The iron was cold and left a gray line on my palm. The little cross with my name swayed and clicked against the bars when the hazard light flashed. The light blinked and, for a blink, I saw faces in the cemetery. I told myself it was the stones lined up just so. I told myself the pines made trick shadows, but I saw eyes at the level of the top row of crosses. I saw mouths where the names should be on the markers. The nail tapping shifted. It was not coming from the trees. It was not coming from the fence. It was inside the sedan. It was coming from the trunk. A slow tack, pause, like a finger with a nail that is too long, tapping the inside of a lid. The hazard lights did not flash on the next beat. They skipped like a heart does when the doctor is listening and you have had too much coffee. Then they went steady. The glow held, and in that steady light I could see the hairline around the trunk lid lift and set, with something breathing inside there. I walked back to the car like the road was not under me. I found the key slot and the little button by feel. The fog touched the back of my neck like cold breath. I pushed the button. The trunk clicked. The lid rose an inch and stopped. A thin smell came out, sweet and rotten, like cut flowers that have been forgotten. Something whispered from inside the dark, right up against the crack, in a voice that used my name the way you use a spoon to dig soft dirt. It used my name again, slow and soft, right through that inch of dark. It sounded like it was smiling. It said, "Let me breathe, honey. You brought the key." I swallowed and heard it in my own throat. I said, "Who are you?" My voice shook and came back to me from the metal like I was inside there too. A wet rasp slid up from the crack, not a cough, more like a tongue moving over a dry tooth. A thin strand of hair lifted into the light, the color of wet straw, and stuck to the edge of the lid. I told myself to be a man and get it done. I went back to the truck and grabbed the lug wrench, the big one, the one that feels safe because it is heavy. I wedged it under the trunk lip and leaned. The lid groaned a little and rose to 2 inches. The smell got harder. It was flowers that have been dead too long, and perfume gone sour, and a note of road salt. Something inside tapped once on the inner wall, then stopped, like it was telling me it could knock as long as it needed. The gate across the road breathed. The iron gave a small sound like a sigh. The little cross with my name turned once and clicked on a bar. The fog came off the graves and flowed down the hill like a slow spill of milk. My skin crawled the way it does before a storm. The voice used my name the way my mother does when I am late. It said, "You left me. You always leave me." It laughed low, and it was a laugh I knew from my own mouth when I am trying to be polite but I am angry. I pushed the lug wrench up an inch more. A finger slid out into the cold. It was too clean. It was not the color of a finger that has seen sun. The nail was long and had a black crescent under it like moon dirt. I did not see a cuticle. It tapped once on the lid, gentle as a spoon on glass. The tapping from out by the fence answered it, tack for tack, from all up and down the line of little crosses. I stared. The crosses were not where I had left them in my head. They leaned in toward the road now, like they were listening. I said, "I am calling the sheriff." The phone in my pocket warmed and pulsed once like a heartbeat and went dead again. The voice inside the trunk said my number out loud, the one I never give to anyone. It said it slow and sweet like I had written it on its palm. I snapped. I slammed the lid down. I felt the kiss of the finger as the seal shut on it. I jerked the wrench back, ready for a scream. There was no scream. There was a small happy sound from inside, a chuckle, like a kid getting away with something. It said, "Not yet. Count them right." I turned in a circle with the flashlight like a fool. The beam stroked the white wood one by one. I counted, steady, the way I count lug nuts. I came up one short. I tried again. I came up one short. I said it out loud. I said, "One short." The pines breathed that back to me. From the fog by the graves, a low murmur rose, the same 2 words. My voice poured back thin and wrong. One short, one short. I ran to the cab. I wanted a door between me and that voice. The truck key fought me. The dash lights fluttered like moths. The radio came on by itself and the dead air hissed like a mouthful of teeth. A woman's voice said my name the way you do when you are waking someone. It sounded like my mother and it sounded like the person in the trunk. I turned the radio off. It turned itself on. I turned the key and the starter moaned. I said a prayer I only half remember. The engine caught. I eased forward and the tow strap went tight. The sedan jerked like a fish on a line. The trunk lid popped an inch and bobbed, almost playful. In my mirror, I saw the dark inside of it. Something sat up into that bobbing light for just a breath. It was a face, but not right. It was my face drowned of color, with the lips kept shut by a strip of twine that crossed them 3 times. It opened one eye. The eye rolled in the socket slow, like it was heavy. I stared too long. The truck drifted toward the ditch and the crosses bumped my tires with the sound of teeth on rubber. I jerked the wheel and brought us back. As I eased past each little cross, the wood clicked once, like it knocked its own chest. I did not look left or right. I watched the middle of the road and counted every click without wanting to. I heard hammer strokes under the sound of the engine. I smelled sawdust where there should not be sawdust. I hit the last bend, and the fog let go. The gate fell out of sight in the rear window. The radio went quiet. The hazard lights on the sedan flicked their tired orange again. I breathed. I kept breathing until my throat hurt. I pulled into the gas station at the junction and stopped under the yellow lamp. I got out and walked to the back. There was twine tied to my hitch. It was tight like a vein. It went down to the pavement and dragged behind me a foot or 2. The little cross from the gate was at the end of it. It was scraped and chipped, and the letters of my name were raw and dark and wet, like they had just been burned. I took my knife and cut the twine. The cross dropped and turned itself without a hand, so the name faced me again. I left it there. I drove the sedan to the yard and logged the tow. I did not open the trunk. I put a chain on it. I put a lock on the chain. I told myself I would check it in daylight. When I sat at my desk, my drawer rapped 3 times like a knuckle. I opened it and there was a nail head standing up in the felt, tapping by itself. It sank into the wood when I reached for it, and I could not pull it back out. I did not sleep. My mother called me near dawn. She said my name and asked if I was safe. She said she dreamed of me in a box with the lid shut and I was laughing. I told her I was fine. She paused and said my name a second time in a voice not hers. I hung up and cried into my hands like a little boy. I had to drive Pine Hollow again that night. I slowed at the line of white. I did not mean to count. My mouth counted for me. I came up 1 short. I looked in the rear view and saw a little cross hanging from the mirror for just a blink. Twine looped neat. My name turned toward me. When I reached up, there was nothing there. The nail tapping started up gentle in the back of my truck, patient as rain. If you ever see 2 lanterns walking side by side on Briar Lick Burial Road, do not stop. I stopped because I thought somebody needed help with a casket. I was driving home the back way, past the feed mill, past the old quarry, where the blacktop turns to gravel and the gravel turns to 2 pale ruts with grass between them. Briar Lick Burial Road sits along a skinny ridge with the family plots on one side and the creek in a cut on the other. The graves are older than the county lines, fieldstone markers, names you have to feel with your fingers to read. It was late enough that the bar lights in town were already dead. I remember the time glowing on the dash and the way the numbers looked cold. I was not thinking about ghosts. I had a bag of rock salt in the back from the hardware store and a thermos of coffee gone bitter. The moon was thin. Fog sat in the low parts and blinked when my headlights touched it, like an animal waking up. I slowed at the bend near the burial ground because I saw light that was not mine. It was not a car. It was the color of candle flame with milk stirred into it. It moved low to the ground, and it moved without hurry. 2 lanterns came around the far corner of the road and walked toward me side by side. That is how I have to say it. They walked. They did not swing like somebody's arm was carrying them. They stepped. The glass chimneys breathed, a soft drawing in and out that made a small fog inside the globe. I could hear a little rattle like a wick lifting. The handles did not hang on anything I could see. Between them, there was a space that looked like it had weight in it, the way air looks heavy over hot pavement. I put my truck in park and rolled the window down because I could not think of anything else. The creek was loud below, chewing on stones. The smell of damp leaves and iron came up the bank. The lantern stopped about 10 paces off my front bumper. They tipped toward me like a nod. The glass threw light on the gravel and made it look wet. My granddad used to tell stories about the lanterns that walk. He said they come when a coffin is late, or when a road forgets which way to go. He said never step between them because they will make you carry. He said leave bread or salt, and do not look back. He said a lot of things I did not hold on to right. I remembered the part about salt. I had a bag of it. That felt like a favor from God. I got out slow. The night pressed around my shoulders like a coat that did not fit. I said, "Hey, you all okay out here?" The lanterns answered by lifting a hair and letting their light fatten. The space between them seemed to breathe. A smell came out that hurt my teeth. It was flowers left too long and cloth shut up in a box. Something moved up on the grave hill. It was not a person. It was a shape like the outline of a hat and a long coat cut out of the dark by a pair of shears. It did not come down. It turned toward the road like it was waiting to see if I knew my manners. I went around to the back of the truck and grabbed the rock salt. The bag was heavy and damp on the outside. When I carried it to the front, the lanterns took one slow step back, like they were making room for me. I set the bag down and ripped it open with my knife. The blade jumped wrong in my hand and nicked the skin on my thumb. A drop of blood hit the salt and made a small hiss. I sprinkled a white line on the gravel and said, "I am just passing through." My breath looked like smoke even though it was not that cold. The lanterns watched. That is the only word that fits. They watched. The flames leaned toward each other and made a thin path of light between them, pointed at my boots. A voice spoke without sound. It shaped the word carry inside my head the way a church bell shapes a morning. It felt old and heavy and normal at the same time. I shook my head like I could spill it out. I said, "No, sir." My voice came back from the trees like somebody else had said it farther away. The space between the lanterns deepened. The light around the gap held a shape like a plank across two sawhorses. I smelled wood shavings and raw pine. I heard cloth rub on wood, slow and careful. My hands lifted without me telling them to. My palms turned up the way you do when somebody hands you a sleeping baby. I backed up and my heel found the edge of the road. The drop to the creek waits right there. I looked down and saw water and a little pale fire walking along the top of it like the creek was a street. My stomach flipped. I looked up fast and the lanterns were closer. I had not seen them move. They were just there, bracketing me, warm on my knees and cold at my chest. The thing on the hill tipped its head toward me. The lanterns tipped the other way, like a greeting met in the middle. The air between them pulled tight and I felt weight settle on my forearms. It was not heavy like a log. It was heavy like a promise. It lay across me from wrist to wrist, and the cold of it crept into my bones. The smell of lilies came up so strong it made my eyes water. Under it there was a little sweet rot, and under that, a note like coins in a wet hand. My fingers curled around nothing. Only there was fabric there, and the fabric had a weave I could feel. It was canvas, rough and old, with a seam that ran crooked. It moved. It shifted like something inside was turning to get comfortable. A small knock came from the middle, gentle as a knuckle on a door. The lanterns lifted slow to my pace as if I had already started walking. The shape on the hill turned and began down the sunken track toward the bend where the road falls into the trees. I did not want to go. My legs remembered the rule before my head did. Do not walk between them. Do not let them put you in the middle. My legs did not listen. They took one step, then two. With the third step, something under that blank weight exhaled. Warm against the canvas my hands could not see. My fingers twitched, but they did not let go. They had learned a shape without my permission. The seam of that cloth fit the lines of my palms like it had been measured for me. The lanterns kept pace, one at each side. They breathed soft, little glass lungs catching and letting go, and the air between them tugged at my knuckles when I lagged. When I sped up, the weight lifted a hair. When I slowed, it pressed down, gentle but sure, a reminder you do not argue with. Gravel clicked under my boots. Dry grass brushed my shins. Far off, a barred owl asked and asked. We turned off the track, I knew. The road had a new bend that was not there last week. It ran along the burial ground fence, then leaned toward the creek. On the hill, the hat shape slid along with us in the same easy backwards walk, brim low, coat long, no man inside of it. I tried to look through the space between the lanterns. There was something there, a narrow dark laid crosswise across my arms, the length of it about what you think. The smell of lilies was stronger. Under it, I caught that wet metal note again, like coins in a palm held too tight. I told myself to put it down. I told my knees to fold. They did not. If I tried to drop, a prickling heat rose around my wrists, as if glass had teeth. If I did not fight, the weight turned light as a child. We passed a field stone on the right with our family name scratched the wrong way. Letters backward like a child looking in a mirror. I saw the first three and then the fourth would not sit in my head. I saw my granddad's pocket knife scar there too, a little cut he made when he was a boy, and the lanterns lifted their flames at it like a nod. Granddad's rules came up hard, late and plain as a slap. Do not step between them. If you do, salt and speak. I did not have a bag in my hands, but I am a man who handles feet in snow, and I keep a pinch of rock salt in my coat pocket when the weather turns. My thumb still bled a little from nicking it on the knife. Salt grains stuck to the skin. I felt for my pocket without changing my stride. The weight noticed. It shifted and a small knock came from the heart of it, polite as a neighbor. The lantern to my left dipped as if listening. We came to a flat place where two old sycamore roots made a cradle in the bank. Two flat stones sat there, level as a bench, dark with damp. The hat shape stopped above them. The lanterns tilted inward. My knees bent on their own, and the air between the lights pulled my hands toward that cradle. I could feel the weave of the cloth against my fingertips. There was a seam dead center, crooked, with a fat stitch every inch or so. I got the pinch of salt. There were maybe 7 grains, 8 at most, stuck to my bloody thumb. I pressed them into that seam and said the words my granddad used when a hog's back got haunted by a shadow, not mine to carry. My voice came out thin, but it came out. The seam hissed under my skin. The hiss ran away under the cloth like it was hunting an edge. The weight wriggled, the way a sack of feed does when a mouse has gotten into it and does not know which way is up. The lantern stepped back a hair, glass chimneys fogging, flames going small, then tall. The hat shape lifted as if a head might be under it after all, and then sank, empty as always. I jerked my arms down and away. The weight slid off and did not hit the ground. It hung there, resting on nothing, an inch over the stones, the way a plank hangs when 4 hands hold it and none are attached. The air around it looked thick, like hot air over a grill. The smell went sharp, burnt sweet, as if lilies had been singed with a match. I ran. The lanterns followed at my knees, one on each side, keeping the gap exactly where my arms wanted to open again. They did not touch me, but if I veered right, the right one slid. If I veered left, the left one was there waiting, polite and patient. The creek to my side hissed and showed me 2 pale fires walking along its surface in step with the ones at my flanks. When I looked back, the hat was gone. Or maybe it had never been anything but the idea of weight wearing a brim. I hit the place where my truck waited, and the salt line I had poured looked darker, wet and clumped. The bag itself had slumped open, heavy with damp. I grabbed the top and dragged it, spilling a white path from my bumper to my door. The lanterns paused at the first spill. The glass clouded. A tiny crack appeared on the left chimney with a sound like ice. Then they thinned and slipped around the line, not over it, around it, as if the road learned a notch I had never seen. I threw myself into the cab and slammed the door. The engine stuttered, coughed, and then caught. In the mirror, I saw the 2 lights jump easy into the bed of my truck. One fore, one aft, with a piece of dark laid between like a plank. The bed thumped once. The thump was not my tires. It was a knuckle from inside the rock salt bag. I fishtailed out and did not stop till my own mailbox hit my lights. I pulled into my gravel, heart shaking my teeth. The 2 lanterns stepped down from the bed by themselves and took their places at my front path. The space between them looked like it had been made for my arms. I cut the engine and sat with my hands under my thighs so they would not lift. They waited all night. At dawn they were gone. The bag of salt on my porch had swelled like bread. When I slid it, wet crystals spilled out, yellowed, and a strip of old canvas slid with them, stitched crooked, smelling like lilies and coins. I kicked it into the ditch. The ditch water walked it away, slow as a funeral. Now most nights, about 2 in the morning, my dog lifts his head and does not bark. I look through the blinds and see two soft fires come up my driveway, step around the places where I laid salt, and stop on either side of my door like patient men with good backs. They do not knock. They do not have to. My arms remember the weight and ache to lift. Last night they came into the hall without opening anything at all. They were on either side of my bedroom door by the time I could sit up. There was a little warm breath between them you could almost see. As I write this, they are downstairs again. The light moves like feet. They have learned my steps. When they stop on each side of my bed, I think the space between is exactly the length of me. Folks around Rook Hill say if you hear a whistle from the cemetery gate, do not answer it. I did, because I thought it was my dad. I was coming back from a late shift, the kind that makes your eyes grainy and your mouth taste like dust. The road to my place curls past Rook Hill like a belt around a waist. The cemetery sits above the curve, pines tight around it, a stone wall with a rusted iron gate, and a chain that looks tougher than it is. It was my father's birthday. I had a jelly jar of wild asters in the passenger seat. He is buried there, second row on the left, plot with the leaning stone that never stays upright long. I told myself I would just set the jar at the gate and say hello, then go on home. It was a hot night, the kind where you can smell honeysuckle and road tar both and hear the creek even over the crickets. Mist sat in the low places like something crouched there, thinking. I pulled over where the ground widens by the ditch. Gravel popped under my tires. My headlights found the gate bars and made the metal look wet. The padlock hung fat and dull, with a pale scrape in the fogged rust where someone had rubbed at it. I cut the engine. The sudden quiet felt like cotton stuffed in my ears. A night bird called twice and then swallowed its own voice. I stepped out with the jar and set it on the top stone of the wall. The iron smelled like old pennies and rain. When my hand brushed the gate, I felt the cold run up my arm and into my teeth. I whispered, "Happy birthday, Daddy." And a little wind came, sweet and thin, the kind that touches your hair and not your skin. The first whistle came from behind the bars. It was soft, just a glide of notes, a tune not fancy, the opening of Shady Grove. My mouth smiled without asking me. That was my father's tune. He would whistle it in the truck with one hand on the wheel, the last long note drifting out the window over the corn. I did what I always used to do. I answered. I gave the second line back, not loud, just enough to say I heard. It answered again, only this time the breath at the end went backwards. I do not know how to describe it right. It felt like the air in my chest pulled the note away from me, like I had not made the sound at all, and something had taken it out of my mouth. I remembered what folks say, do not whistle back at night, not on Cemetery Road, not toward iron. The thought came late, like a warning that tries to run in a dream and never gets there in time. I laughed a little to keep it light. I said, "Mr. Tate, that you?" Mr. Tate keeps the grounds, but he is not one for songs. The answer was a low run of notes like a shrug. I lifted the jar to tuck it through the bars. The chain tapped the gate on its own, like a finger on a glass. The padlock turned a hair and stopped. A smell came out that was not rot exactly. It was damp dirt and something fresh under it, like peeled bark. I could see a sliver of the first row of stones through the bars. There was foxfire blooming in the weeds, that cold blue that makes the ground look like it thinks. The glow ran in a line, little foot shapes like a child had walked there barefoot, and then wandered off to the darker places. I tried my phone. The screen came up and showed the time wrong. 3 little digits that made no sense. The signal bars were there, then not. When I put the phone to my ear, I heard the tail of the tune where a dial tone should be, faint and tinny, with a hitch in it like somebody with a hole in their lip. I said, "All right, I am going." The whistle said my name. Not full, not word-shaped, but the rhythm of it. I know the way my name sounds when a loved one calls it across a field. That is what I heard. It was my father's rhythm, the exact way he would shape the first syllable when I was picking blackberries and he wanted me to come up to the truck. I pressed the jar to my chest and felt my hands shake. Behind me, from down by the ditch, another line of the tune came. Softer, like it was far away and close at the same time. I turned fast, bumping the jar against the stone. The flowers rattled, stems squeaking. Road and woods looked the same. Gravel, shrubs, and the cut in the hill. Nothing there. The crickets had gone thin. Even the creek seemed to be holding one breath. I took the chain to pull it tighter through the bars. It felt warm. That did not make sense, not with night air on it. My thumb slipped in a smear on the iron like spit. The gate breathed a little and leaned against the chain like a heavy person on a screen door. I said, "This is not funny." A reply came from behind the gate that was not a whistle and not a word, something in between. It shaped a sound near to my childhood nickname without saying it. It made me think of small things cupped in two hands. I stepped closer because I knew better and did not care. Between the bars, not far in, the dark held the shape of a hat, low on a head. I could not see a face. The hat did not move. The tune went on, slow and gentle, and I felt the end of it tremble on my lips like I was a flute, and somebody else owned the air. The chain slid. I did not mean to let it go. It moved through my fingers smooth as water. The padlock turned on its own, and the first inch of gate came open. The iron sucked cold into my lungs. The tune finished in the space behind my teeth, as if something had taken its mouth to mine without touching. Right then, on my breath, the voice that is not a voice leaned close and said in the shape of a whistle, "Bird." The whistle shaped my old nickname and held it against my lips. I felt a ring of cold there, like the air itself made a mouth over mine. The gate moved a little wider without sound. I did not mean to step in. One foot slid through, then the other, because I did not want to turn my back on whatever had just called me that name. The ground inside was soft and springy, cool through the soles of my shoes. The foxfire glowed in prints that matched my stride before I made it, heel to toe, a small blue light waiting for my weight. The hat shape a few yards in slid backward, no shoulders, no face, just the brim and a piece of dark that swallowed the moonlight. The tune came low and sweet, and the last note trembled on my teeth like I was a reed and somebody else owned the breath. I tried to say my father's name. My throat worked. What came out was the answer to the tune, the second line, clear and pretty, and not mine. It was like something cupped my chest from the inside and squeezed gently at the right places. I clapped a hand over my mouth. The next two notes slid out of my nose anyway, thin and helpless. The jar in my other hand grew heavy until my arm shook. My father's stone stood straight in the second row. It had leaned my whole life. Tonight it held itself proud, letters neat as if spit shined. I bent to set the jar on the wall, and the glass licked cold at my palm. Fog formed inside like breath on a window. The asters tilted all at once, petals sighing as if they were tired. That smell of peeled bark grew sharper, sweet with a bitter bit, the way a green stick smells when you snap it. My phone buzzed. The screen lit my fingers up bone white. It showed my father's old contact photo calling, the one of him in his hat. The number under it was mine. I answered because I am weak where he is concerned. A thin whistle came up through the little speaker, the same two bars he always started with, only hollowed and slippery, like it had been pulled through a small hole in a wall. As I listened, my chest sank. Breath ran out of me in a steady stream that I could not stop. I felt my ribs ache like I had been laughing too long. I dropped the phone and it skittered across the grass and slid between two stones. The whistle went on from the ground, sweet as a night bird, and the foxfire made a little necklace around it. The chain brushed my wrist, warm and slick. It had never been warm. A strand of something fine tugged my hair behind my ear the way my father used to do when he needed to see my face, and I smiled for half a breath before I felt the burrs. They were little hook seeds clinging to my skin, and they drew a line of sting where they dragged. The hat lifted the smallest bit, and I saw under the brim. There was not a head. There was a hollow. It was a place shaped like a face where a face should have been. It did not reflect my light. It drank it. The jar in my hand began to sing by itself, a hush of sound as the wind that was not wind moved over the rim. The asters withered as I watched, the stems going stringy and the petals laying their tongues down on the glass. Two whistles now, one from the gate, where the iron leaned like an ear, one from down by the ditch where I had parked. They spoke to each other through me, my little mouth a bridge. They moved around and through, sometimes in front of me, sometimes behind, sometimes both, a circle of air that did not touch my skin and still made me shiver. I heard words without words. I heard breathe. I heard home. I heard the shape of bird again, so tender it hurt my eyes. I ran. I left the jar on the stone and I ran crooked through the prints so I would not step where Blue wanted me to step. The gate stood all the way open like a patient arm. I pressed through and my shoulder burned where the iron met it. The night outside felt warmer and wrong. The whistle came from the crack of my car door before I opened it, a tiny sound made by the rubber seal. I got in and slammed the door and it only made the tune richer, as if the weather stripping was a mouthpiece waiting on me. The engine caught ugly. The tune rode every rattle. When I turned my head to check the road, the breath came out of me in a long note that filled the car. I held my nose and mouth shut with one hand, and the sound found its way through the vents in the dash, thin as thread, strong as twine. In the mirror, I saw the gate stand open a finger's width. The hat shape waited there, brim low, patient and still. A shadow the size of a child stood in front of it and lifted a hand that was not a hand. I drove home without the radio. I did not want to give it another mouth. I parked crooked in my own yard and sat with my hand over my face till my heartbeat slowed. The porch light hummed. Something small moved behind my screen door and tapped once, polite as a neighbor. The jar of asters waited on my mat. Same jelly glass, same string around the neck, but the water inside was the color of tea, and a curl of cold stood over the rim like a candle flame that had forgotten to be hot. When the evening breeze touched it, it sang my father's tune perfect as he ever did. I took the jar to the back and dropped it on the stones. The glass broke into a bright collar and the whistle did not stop. It changed, that was all. The rough edge made a lower note, a sadder one. The water ran away and left a ring on the stone that looked like a mouth left open too long. I slept with pillows pushed against my face, and still, near morning, I woke up whistling. No breath in it, no effort. A tune played from the place where my tongue met my teeth, soft and steady. The clock blinked a wrong hour, and I did not care. I put my fist against my lips like you do for grief, and the note slid pure through the crack at my knuckles. At noon, I took salt in my pocket and went back to Rook Hill because that is what Mr. Tate always says in church suppers when folks trade stories. Carry salt. The gate was chained and locked like it had never moved. The leaning stone leaned again. I stood there with the sun on me and my throat tight, and I heard a small whistle come from the far side of the road. It was the part of the tune that asks for an answer. A child's voice answered it in a higher key from behind the laurel. I opened my mouth to shout no, and my breath went sideways and answered back for me, sweet and sure, the notes clean as glass. I caught my mouth shut in my hands. The sound kept going through my fingers. Across the ditch, I saw the laurel leaves shiver and part, and a small shadow stepped out, head turned toward the iron. I stamped my heel and the gravel spit, and the tune still flowed, patient as creek water, asking and asking. Something behind the gate leaned close to listen. Folks around our ridge say never count past 2 at Possum Trot Curve. If you say the words third grave out loud, it hears you. I said them because I thought it was just an old way to scare kids from joyriding. Possum Trot Curve is a crooked bend where the creek bites in under the road and a family burying ground sits up on the right, fenced with chain and iron posts. You can see the stones plain when the moon hangs low. The curve got its name because the possums use that ditch like a hallway every night. You hear their claws tick on the rock. My mother used to cross herself when we came through there and kiss her fingers, even if she had a cigarette in the other hand. Count to 2, she would say, and keep your eyes on the road. I deliver suppers for folks who cannot drive. It was close to midnight after a rain, and I had one last drop on the far side of the ridge. The straightway was washed with limbs. I took the cemetery road because it is high ground most of the way. I told myself a story about saving time and gas. When I hit the first hum of that curve, my lights found wet iron and pale stones, and a possum the size of a small dog lifting its nose at the breeze. The night had that clean smell after rain, but under it I caught wet clay and iron. The creek talked a low talk. Crickets thinned out and left a gap you can hear even over the tires. The little burial ground sat quiet, but not empty. I could feel that, the way you know if a room has someone in it without seeing them. As I climbed the bend, my headlights touched 3 stones in a row near the fence. The first leaned back like it had settled. The second had a jar on top, old jelly glass with wire around the neck. The third, my lights touched it and then blinked, like something stepped between. The radio in my dash, which was turned off, caught half a bar of a hymn, the kind they hum under their breath when the preacher is long. I told myself it was moisture in the wire. I should have kept going. I stopped. My foot did that before my head. I put my flashers on. The orange light made the iron glitter like something with a pulse. The possum in the ditch squeaked and trotted across in front of me, tail dragging a black line that filled with water right away. I got out because I am dumb and because curiosity has my face. The air shifted cool and then cool again like a breath taken in and out. The jar on the second stone had a red ribbon and a key inside. It looked like my spare, the one I keep in a fake rock by the steps. I laughed at myself for thinking that. I leaned close. The ribbon was frayed the same way mine is. The bow was loose in the same lazy knot I tie. There was a nick on the key head from when I dropped it once on the driveway. I did not touch the jar. I swear I did not. A little scraping sound came from under the third mound, small and steady, metal on grit. It did not sound like a shovel blade bit deep. It sounded like the metal side of a spade scratching at the coffin lid, slow there and slow back. I looked at the third stone. It was flatter than the others, a new slab set low. The name on it looked like chalk at first, rubbed on with a heel of soapstone. I wiped at my eyes and the letters came sharp. My last name was there, the way the county clerk writes it, with the loop on the G big as a mouth. My phone lit in my pocket by itself. The time said something that was not a time. The little flashlight button turned on without me pressing and cut a white coin in the dark. I swung it across the stones and counted the way you do when your mouth does not want to. 1, 2. I stopped there, because I am not a fool. I heard my mother's voice in my head say, "Keep your eyes on the road." I kept my eyes on the third stone instead. The jar on the second stone clicked, a little glass kiss like somebody tapped it with the edge of a key. Mist lay along the ground and held in place like it had hands. The chain on the gate slid and made a wet whisper. I said, "All right," to nobody. The possum crept back out of the ditch and stood up on its back legs like it was watching too. It had a white milk ring around one eye. It put one little hand on the third mound and patted twice. The dirt there moved. It puffed, just a breath, and sank. The metal scraping stopped. Something below tapped 3 times on the lid. Not loud, not dramatic. It was polite, like a person who does not want to wake the whole house. I took a step back and my heel hit the bumper hard enough to sting. My headlights flicked and showed the jar again. The ribbon had one more twist than it had before. The key inside had turned, so the cut shone at me. On the third slab, the letters smeared and ran like wet chalk, then drew themselves again, slower. My first name came up under the last, crooked and a little smaller, in the exact hand my mother uses when she writes it on a cake box. The creek rolled a shiny shoulder in the dark. The woods stood up where the wind touched them and then laid down again. Under my feet the gravel ticked once like a seed popped. The third mound lifted the way a chest lifts under a blanket. The smell of wet lilies slipped into the cold, and under it a penny taste filled my mouth as if I had bit my lip and bled. I said, "Who is there?" Because sometimes it is better to pretend you are not scared. Something under the third grave breathed my name. Not said it. Breathed it, like you do on a window before you draw a heart. The breath came up through clay and stone and ribbon and key and touched the skin of my ankle. The ground gave a little. A crack ran in the mound, thin as a pencil line, and widened just enough to show a pale strip like the side of a finger. It moved the tiniest bit, slow and patient, like it was feeling for daylight. When I leaned, it slid back and then pushed forward again, getting braver. Then the dirt at my toe broke loose, and a hand that was not a hand closed around my ankle from underneath, soft and firm as damp cloth, and I felt nails press through my sock like little coins being set in place. It squeezed. The nails pressed through my sock like little coins being set in soft clay, and a slow cold climbed my shin like wet cloth being pulled up a leg. I grabbed the bumper with both hands and the metal bit my palms. My hazard lights pulsed orange on iron and stone, and every blink made the chain on the gate give a small, tired click. The possum with the milk ring turned its head sideways and chittered once. Under the third mound, the dirt rose and fell like a chest. It breathed my name again, just air, no sound, through the soil, and the breath found the bare skin above my sock and cooled it like spit on a burn. I kicked with my free foot and felt only damp clay. The ground gave under my heel like bread. My phone came alive in my pocket and showed a clock face with no hands, and then went black. The jar on the second stone began to tremble. The red ribbon unwound a loop by itself and slid toward the edge, thread by thread, as if a patient mouth was pulling it. Inside, the key spun and tapped the glass, bright teeth of light flashing each time my blink met it. I said, "I am not yours," because that is what you say when a stray dog wants to follow you home. The grip on my ankle got friendly then, soft but sure, like a hand that knows you. The ribbon gave up its last twist and the jar tipped. It did not break. It rolled in a small circle, kissed the second stone, and then bumped to the lip like it knew where it needed to go. When it reached the third slab, the lid made a small metal cry and loosened without a hand. The key slid out and clinked against the edge of my name. Before I could grab it, the possum scuttled forward, took the ribbon in both little hands, and tugged the jar aside. The key fell true into the pencil crack in the mound and stood there a second, shining like a fish in shallow water, and then sank. The earth took it without leaving a ripple. The hand under me squeezed like a thank you. I thought of my mother and how she would tap twice on the dash when we passed here. "Count to 2, she would say. "Keep your eyes on the road." I hit the iron post 2 times with my open palm, hard enough to sting. "First," I said. "Second." I would not say the other word. I would not count that far, not with my mouth, not even in my head. The first stone answered me with a low thump that I felt in my knees. The second gave another. The third tried to give 3 back. The first 2 met it, dull and firm, a rhythm I could sit inside. I kept the beat with the heel of my free foot, knocking twice on the bumper, a small hammer I could use. I had 2 biscuits wrapped in a napkin on the passenger seat, left over from the last drop. I do not remember reaching through the window, but they were in my hands, warm and a little greasy. I set one on the first stone and one on the second and said, "For you, and for you." My breath smoked in the damp and went still. A cool moved sideways across the fence like 2 old men leaning to block a doorway. The dirt around the third went tight and then slack, like a belt being loosened 1 notch. The nails at my ankle drew back a hair, then a hair more, leaving tender rings where they had sat. I pulled hard and felt my sock tear. My foot came free with a wet pop that made my stomach drop. The ground filled in the shape of me at once, smooth as a hand wiping a spill off a table. I stumbled and fell against my fender, breath gone, legs stupid. The jar lay empty by the third slab, lid off, ribbon dragged in the wet. The possum dropped the ribbon and hissed at the mound, a tiny sound, silly and brave. The mound swelled like a sigh and went flat. The creek below rolled on, just water again. The chain on the gate stilled. My hazards ticked their slow orange, and in their pulse the letters of my name on the stone swam, then settled as if holding still for a picture. I got in the car and slammed the door, and the sound did not echo right. It went down, not out, like there was a room under the road. Something tapped 2 times under my floorboard, polite as a neighbor. I answered before I knew I was doing it. 2 taps with the heel of my hand on the steering wheel. The third knock came late, slow, from behind me, under the gravel where my back tires sat. I turned the key and the engine caught. I did not look at the stones. I drove out of there like I had a child sleeping on the seat and did not want to wake them. When I reached my drive, the fake rock that hides my spare was scooted open a thumb's width. My stomach went cold. My porch light showed a jelly jar on my mat with a red ribbon around its neck. The ribbon was tied in the lazy knot I make when I am fussing at myself. Inside was my spare key with the same little nick on the head from when I dropped it that time. Mud rings dried on the glass like breath on a window that had learned to hold still. I picked it up, and the smell of wet lilies came up so soft it made my eyes sting. I tried to throw the jar in the trash can by the road. In the morning it was back on the mat, ribbon straight, water beaded on the inside like it had just been washed. At night, around the same time my hazards had pulsed at the curve, I hear 3 small knocks under my house. Not loud, not mean, just asking to be counted. I knock twice on my headboard and say, first, second, out loud. I do not say the other word. When I forget and count too far in my head, I feel a little cold finger draw a circle on my ankle over the faint rings where the nails had sat. Sometimes the possum with the milk ring waits on the steps and pats the mat 2 times like it is reminding me of my lesson. I will not take that road anymore, even in daytime. But last week, when I drove past the turnoff, my radio caught half a hymn on its own and the clock face went blank. I glanced at my ankle. A wet print showed up there in a neat oval, as if something had kissed the spot through dirt. At home that night, the jar on my mat held a little strip of paper curled inside with letters rubbed on it pale as chalk. It was my last name. The first name was there, smaller, in the hand my mother uses on cakes. The date under it was empty, just a smooth place like a mouth waiting for a word. A knock came under the floor, the rhythm wrong. 2, then a long breath, then the third, patient as rain. If you hear a choir in the pine tops on Stitched Creek Lane, do not answer. I did because I thought I heard my sister. Stitched Creek Lane runs along the old mill water, where they used to sow feed sacks and bury folks on the hill behind the little brush-run church. The church is gone now, only a sign on 2 posts and the cemetery fence remain. Pines hold the ridge, close and tall, and when the wind goes through them, it sounds like a hand sweeping 100 fine strings. Old men say that sound turns to voices on nights when the creek is full. They call it the choir in the pines. They say it is pretty, and they say it is hungry. I believe both parts now. I was coming home from second shift at the warehouse, a little after midnight, hungry and out of cigarettes. It had rained at dark and left the air clean and sweet with a bite of iron from the creek. I took Stitched Creek to save 10 minutes. The lane dips once and then runs flat with a good view of the graveyard through the wire fence. Field stones, a few upright markers, and 2 angel statues that always look like they might have been carved from the same woman. Hands crossed, heads down, faces the creek. The first note found me at the dip. It was not loud. It was clear, like a single thread pulled tight. It came from the high part of the trees, a thin line that made my skin bump up. The second note joined it from farther up the ridge, a third from down by the bend. It was not a radio. I had mine off. It was too clean for a radio and too steadily sweet. The hair on my forearms rose like it had been told to listen. I said out loud, "That is pretty." And the sound changed at once. New notes slipped in, not louder, just more of them. They stacked like quilts. The high ones lifted, and the low ones set under them like floor joists. In the middle there was a voice I knew in my bones. It was my sister, 2 years gone and buried on that hill, who could not carry a tune in life to save her. The voice I heard could carry anything. She sang my name like it was a held note. I pulled off onto the little shoulder by the fence because my heart had already done the thing my hands were going to do. Gravel clicked. Sap smell slipped through my window, bright and sweet like turpentine and cut grass. The pines leaned together in the breath of the creek. The choir kept on, low and high and more, every needle singing like the thin green thing it was. I stepped out and shut the door very gentle, like you do near a sleeping child. On the fence post nearest my door, a piece of hymnal page was pinned with a thorn. The paper was soft from damp and had little notes printed like shapes, triangles, and squares. In pencil down at the bottom margin, somebody had written my first name and the number 4. I put my finger on it and felt a little sting like I had pricked myself on a pine tip. When I lifted my hand, a hair-thin strand of something clear stretched from my finger to the paper and then snapped. It shivered in the air like a spider thread, and then was not there. The song swelled, and the pines made the kind of sound you feel in your chest bones, not just in your ears. Between the trunks, pale shapes stood without faces. I thought at first it was fog, but they were tall where the branches were low, and their edges did not move with the rest of the night. The two angel statues by the bend looked up a hair, more than they ever had in daylight. I leaned on the fence and whispered my sister's name. I do not know what I wanted. A sign, a wind, something that had warmth. The choir answered me with a chord that almost smiled. I closed my eyes and hummed one note back, low as I could, small as I could make it. Habit did that. I sang beside my sister when we were kids, and I always found the harmony down under. A breath later, I remembered the rule. Do not answer. Too late. The song paused like a swallow between wings. The wind died. Needles that had been scratching one another held still. Then the entire ridge seemed to inhale. The sound came back twice as many and close. It filled my mouth like steam. A thin, cool line touched the left corner of my lip. I moved, and it moved with me. Stuck gentle. A cobweb at first, then a thread. Cool as creek water, tasting like sap and pennies. Lines were strung across the lane, so fine I had not seen them till the sound caught them. They ran from pine to pine, knotted neat to bark where sap had bled. A few had bits of hymnal tied at the knots, little teeth of paper. One thread ran from the page with my name to the fence wire, across my shoulder, and then to my mouth. I did not put it there. It found me. My phone lit by itself in my pocket. The screen showed a voice memo recording with a red dot and a little bar that rose and fell like a heart. The memo title filled in by itself. It wrote my sister's name and the word tenor. The thin line at my lip tightened. Its taste went sweet for a breath, and then copper. "Hey," I said, trying to laugh, my mouth moving small so I would not snap anything else. The choir beneath the pines both answered and didn't. It took my word and fitted it into the chord so clean it made my throat hurt. My own voice came back to me, not from the ground and not from the sky, but from the needles over my head, singing one true note that was mine and not mine. Pine tops shook, though the wind had not moved. Between two trunks, at the height of a woman's shoulder, a little twist of hair was tied to a knot in the bark. My sister wore her hair long. The twist had a ribbon in it the color she liked when we were kids. It lifted like a small tail and lay down again. My chest tightened because some part of me stood up to sing polite in a place I never intended to enter. A breath touched my ear like lips without a body. It was my sister's shape, and it said in my same low, easy voice, "Hold your line." The fine thread at my mouth drew itself snug, and the choir rose bright as morning, as if 100 old hearts waited on the sound coming out of me to finish the shape they had been trying to draw in the air since the mill closed. The pull wasn't hard. It was steady. It found the place in my throat where a note lives, and it held it open like two fingers keep a page. When I tried to shut my lips, the thread ran through the wet hinge and sang with my breath, light as a hair. When I tried to spit it out, it stuck sweet again and then went copper. I brought up my hand to pinch it off. It sliced my fingertip without pressure and left a clean line that stung after the delay. In the pines, high and low, the harmony shifted to carry me. I was not a person in that second. I was a reed. Air owned me. The graves on the hill did not move, and still it felt like the ground leaned in. Between the trunks, those pale knot people took one slow step forward without feet. They did not open their mouths. They did not have mouths. The singing did not come from them. It came from needles and thread and bark. The two angels by the bend lifted their faces one finger, width, and watched like they had always been listening for this. I fumbled for my keys. My work badge hangs on a little chain with a safety pin. I snapped the pin open with my nails, clumsy now, the tips buzzing. My sister's voice rubbed the inside of my ear like a whisper. "Hold, just hold," she said, easy and warm, and my eyes watered because it was her and not her at once. She had hated singing. She would roll her eyes at the choir. She would have laughed and said, "We sound like cats." Now she sounded like water poured over stone. I stuck the safety pin through the thread where it crossed my collar. The pin clicked shut and made a little hum. The thread thrummed like a string drawn over metal, and the whole cord swung sideways, surprised. I grabbed the collar with both hands and yanked my jacket off my shoulders like it was on fire. The thread stayed pinned to the cloth. A second strand whipped up in the dark and caught my lip again, neat as an expert seamstress ties off a knot. I tasted iron. I spat a penny of blood on my shoe. The choir paused and then swelled back stronger, patient. They had plenty of thread. I remembered something my grandmother used to say at shape note singings when somebody got too proud and rich with their part. Turn it strange so it cannot hold you. Break the figure. I took a deep breath and put the wrong sound in the right place. I sang flat on purpose, ugly as I could, like a goat on a slope. It hurt. The thread on my lip vibrated mean, like a mosquito at a screen. The cord above me wobbled in a way that made the hair on my arms hurt. For a second, I felt the pull falter. My jacket hung on the fence by one shoulder, pinned there like a body is pinned by a lay preacher's hand at a baptism. Something moved in the sleeves, a slow settling like someone putting their arms in. I did not look. I reached in my pocket for anything with weight. Coins, keys, gum. My fingers found a roll of mints and the little packet of salt they throw in with takeout. I bit the salt open with my teeth. The thread tasted it and hissed. It turned brittle on my lip for a blink. I lifted my hand and broke it with 2 fingers, the sting bright. I did not run. I plowed. I threw myself toward the truck door like a man pushing through river water. Threads shook from tree to tree, thin lines you could see now that the note had woken them. Some had bits of hair tied in their knots, little twists like saved curls. Some had hymnal teeth. Some were plain and shining. They touched my cheeks and forehead and sang small against my skin. I got the door open and fell inside and pulled it shut. Threads wrote little white scratches on the window where they pressed and sang in the glass. The engine turned on the first try. I do not remember turning the key. I dropped it into drive and the truck lurched. The pinned jacket tore free from the fence and stayed out on the road, a dark shape held in place by a fist of thin lines. As I rolled forward, a fresh thread whipped in the open crack of the window and caught my lip again, slick as a lick. I slammed the glass up on it. The thread stretched like hot candy. It hummed high and then higher and then snapped. It left a neat slit at the corner of my mouth that did not bleed till the note died. I did not look in the mirror. I knew in my bones if I did, I would see my jacket stand by itself in the pines, shoulders filled with nothing, tied at the collar to 100 gentle lines. I drove home with my mouth tasting of salt and sap and pennies and my ears ringing with a song that was half broken and half waiting for me to fix it. At my porch rail, a little bundle of pine needles lay tied with a loop of clear thread. The knot was the kind my sister made when she mended our jeans. It had a bit of hymnal page tucked under it with the shape notes printed like little houses. In pencil, in the same hand as before, was my first name and the number 4. When I touched it, my phone in my pocket began to play a voice memo I did not record. It was me, singing one held note for a minute and a half, clean as glass, while 1,000 soft voices braided around me. I thought about burning the bundle. I thought about throwing it in the creek. I put it in the kitchen drawer and shut it and felt the note keep on inside the wood, soft as breath. Around 3, when the whole ridge holds still, the pines in my yard sighed and the tops spoke in a thin line. I lay there with my mouth closed and my lips pressed together, and still a thread I could not see touched the little slit at the corner and made it tingle like a tooth waking up. At daylight, I went back by Stitched Creek Lane because I wanted to prove I could. My jacket hung in a pine over the fence, high where I could not have thrown it. The sleeves moved in the small wind. Threads ran from cuff to cuff, ticked with tiny knots, some holding bits of hymnal, some holding nothing at all. The angels looked straight ahead like they were pretending not to see. A piece of my own hair was tied at the collar, a color I knew, lifted and lay down again, like a tail. Last night the pines sang low just past my bedroom window, and in the cord I heard my own voice asking me to hold. When I went to the bathroom, I coughed, and a tiny knot of clear thread sat on my tongue. I drew it out with 2 fingers slow as a fish line and felt something in the darkest part of my mouth tug back, polite and patient, as if the choir in the pines had found me a place in their shape and was waiting for me to take my breath and join.